I am slightly embarrassed to show you guys my stats from this year. Hi guys, welcome. My name's Amanda. I read mostly romance, if I'm being honest with myself, whether that's contemporary new release romance, indie published romance, fantasy romance, dark fantasy romance, LGBTQ plus romance. I like to read from other genres too, don't get me wrong, but at my core, I think I'll always be that little girl who used to get so excited for the new Sarah Dessen or Twilight release. I read consistently about 120 books per year, and I've been yapping about books over on the Clock app for about 3 years now. But I've definitely been an avid viewer, consumer, member of the booktube community for that same amount of time. In my opinion, booktube is really the place to go if you want more in-depth book recs, whether that's in the form of book vlogs or book reviews or seasonal and cozy book content. And that's really why I'm here and what I'm hoping to share with you guys. So where better to start than my top 10 reads of 2024. I know we're like halfway through January already, but if we're being honest, I'm gonna click on a video that says best books of the year, favorite books of the year every single time, because if I'm getting book recs, I want the best of the best. So let's look at my reading stats from 2024. So I use Storygraph right now. I am interested in potentially getting back on Goodreads this year though. I have a Goodreads account technically, but I haven't updated it in like 3 years. But one of my main goals for 2025 is to read more indie published fantasy romance, and I know that a lot of indie authors really rely on Goodreads. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on that. I'd love to know. I do love Storygraph though. I have no problems with it, and I really like the stats features. Okay, but getting into my stats, in 2024 I read a total of 122 books, which was 45,041 pages, and my average time to finish a book was 4 days, which makes sense because towards the end of the year I got a little bit more chaotic in my reading than usual. I discovered audiobooks, which I know is like, wow, you discovered audiobooks, but I'd never really been an audiobook fan before until like the end of the year. And I got to a point where now I'll have like an audiobook going at the same time as like a book on my Kindle and a physical book, and it's gotten bad. I typically read medium-paced books that are around 300 to 500 pages. My top genres were romance and contemporary romance and fantasy, which definitely makes sense for me. I read 46% digital books, 35% print, and 19% audio, which is surprising to me because, like I said, I really got into audiobooks like towards the end of the year, so 19% is a pretty big number. My most read authors were Laura Pavlov. You can tell that I really went through a KU phase in February and March because I binge read like all of Laura Pavlov's series. Ali Hazelwood is my second most read author, which definitely makes sense. I feel like she has a new book release like every few months, and I'm gonna read anything she puts out at this point. She's an auto-buy author for me for sure. And my average rating this year was 3.84 stars. My reviews were honestly pretty split between 3 stars, 4 stars, and 5 stars. But the crazy part to me is I did read 100% fiction this year. So I think if these stats are telling me anything, it's that I very much read in my comfort zone this year, which is okay, it's not a problem, but I did read so much contemporary romance that kind of got lost a little bit for me in the middle. There were so many books that I read on my Kindle that honestly I can't remember anything about and that were just okay. And if I think about the books that really made an impact on me, it was of course some of the romance books that I'm going to talk about in this video from authors that are just doing it right. But honestly, most of them are the fantasy romance books I picked up this year. So, okay, let's get into my favorites. Before I get into my top 10, I do have 2 honorable mentions that I wanted to talk about because they were still 5-star reads for me, but they're a little bit lesser known than some of the other books I picked for my top 10, and I just think that they deserve a shout out. So the first one is If It Makes You Happy by Olivia. This one I kind of found on a whim, just searching for fall romances to pick up. If there's one thing about me, it's that I'm gonna read seasonally, and I found this one. It looked really cute. I liked the cover. It was definitely giving the fall vibes that I was looking for, but I wasn't expecting it to be as good as it was. This honestly ended up being my favorite fall romance this year. The plot's not groundbreaking by any means. It kind of has that familiar small town Hallmark plot where it's like a big city working girl comes to the small town. She has to take over her mother's inn, and then she of course meets a super hot next door neighbor who's also a baker and a fantastic single dad. But what made this one so special to me were the characters. The characters were so well developed. They had so much depth, so maybe a little bit unlike Hallmark. And this is set in 1997, so there's kind of a nostalgic, cozy element to this one as well that I really loved. And it's also set around the holidays, so it starts with Halloween and goes through like Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I think New Year's too, but there's also several little fall festivals and cute like town events and stuff like that, and it was just so cozy and so special and heartwarming, and I thought the writing was really fantastic as well. Definitely worth adding to your list to read in the fall time. Like, bangs are annoying the crap out of me. And my second honorable mention was On the Same Page by Haley Cass. This is a sapphic best friends to lovers romance, and I have a hard time with friends to lovers, to be completely honest, and this one I think is done right. I think my main thing with friends to lovers romance is it tends to kind of rely on the fact that they already have an established relationship, but I need to see lots of flashbacks. I need to see their relationship developing in all forms. I want to see their friendship developing from the start, and I want to believe that a romance can develop from that and that there's like an actual believable reason why they weren't already romantically involved, and this one I think does it really well and in a really fun and unique way. The kind of catalyst for their romantic relationship in this book I think is really funny, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I just think it was really unique and fun. And this one was just a really good sapphic romance. Like, I was giddy and kicking my feet. There was so much tension. I loved the spicy moments, but really the friendship and their relationship is what made this. It felt so real. Yeah, just a really good sapphic romance. And I think it's available on KU as well. Now let's get into my actual top 10. So number 10 on my list this year is Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This one might be a little bit of a controversial pick because I know that Bride was much more popular this year, and I loved Bride, don't get me wrong, but I loved this one. And I really didn't see this one getting very much love this year. Of course, it's an Ali Hazelwood book, so people were reading it, but I don't think it was as popular. So this is technically classified as an erotic romance, which is different for her, but I personally think that the amount of character development and relationship development that she was able to fit into this book in such a unique way was really impressive. This follows two characters with a lot of personal issues when it comes to dating and intimacy, and they tend to use intimacy as a crutch or really as a replacement for actual relationships. And so really what this book is it's two characters who end up really caring about each other and just not knowing how to go about that at all. So they start a physical relationship, and the way that their romance develops from that physical relationship I thought was really well done and made a lot of sense for these characters. This book doesn't have the usual like romance, flowery language, love confessions that you'd find in other popular traditionally published romances, even other Ali Hazelwood romances, but to me that felt so much more realistic and raw and made more sense for these characters and was more impressive, that I still felt the tension and the development that I did. I don't know, this one just left a really big impression on me this year. And like I said before, Ali Hazelwood is an auto-buy author for me at this point. I'll read her grocery list. Number 9, I have Savor by Tarah DeWitt. This was the first Tarah DeWitt book that I read, and as soon as I finished this, I went and read like her whole backlist, or I'm working through it currently. I loved this book. One of my favorite romances this year, obviously, because it made the list. But this one is a romance about a burnt out chef from New York who ends up having guardianship over his niece, and they have to move to this small town to help start up a new restaurant. And their new neighbor in this small town is this very eccentric, very colorful, people-pleasing character. This one's just one of those puzzle piece romances for me where I felt like the two characters just really fit together and understood each other and made each other better versions of themselves. I thought the writing was beautiful in this one. I highlighted so many quotes, and it dealt with topics like mental health and burnout and people-pleasing and was so much deeper than the cover suggests, but it still managed to feel lighthearted and fun, and their banter was really good. Definitely a big fan of Tarah DeWitt now. Okay, number 8, I have Slinger by Rachel Schneider. This was one of my favorite romantasy reads this year. I just loved this world so much. It was so interesting. Our main character has never stepped foot on land. She's a part of this kingdom that has been banished to live out on the water, and they've had to build their village out in the middle of the ocean that's made up of huts and bridges all built around a grove of trees. And at the start of the story, our main character is part of the guard for this kingdom, and they are on their way to this market that happens once a year, and it's the closest she's ever been to being on land. And when she's there, she has this very interesting encounter encounter with a guard from the rival kingdom, and he may or may not show up later to convince her to come back with him and step foot on land for the first time. This world was just so fun and interesting and unique. I love the magic system, which I don't want to spoil anything for you, and I love the main male love interest as well. He has a nose ring, if that convinces you. It would get me. And also something you should know about this one is it leaves off on the most wild cliffhanger. You will not see it coming, I promise you. And it'll make you so mad, so frustrated, but also so excited to read the next book, which I think comes out this year. At number 7, I have Kingdom of Claw by Demi Winters. This is the second book in the Ashen series. The first one is The Road of Bones, if you've seen this one around. But this is a Viking fantasy romance inspired by Norse mythology, and I loved this world so much as well. The reason I chose the second book is I think that the pacing is a lot better and you're kind of more into the world. Demi Winters really takes her time with the world building on this one. If you want to follow a main character's journey from the absolute very beginning and kind of be a part of that journey as she discovers more about herself and about the world and the magic, I think you're really gonna love Scylla. Just get through the first book, trust me. It's still good, but the second book is a lot better. And I think Scylla is really what made this book for me. I love her character so much. I think she's just really intentional. She doesn't make choices that are gonna piss you off. And while she starts out not really knowing much, she grows so much and you're just gonna love her, I promise. I also just want to say I cannot wait for the third book to come out because I think that the direction that the story is going in is really interesting and I'm very excited for it. I do think this is going to be a 5-book series. I'll correct myself if I'm wrong. For my number 5 pick, I have Not Another Love Song by Julie Soto. This one really surprised me this year. I read Forget Me Not, I think 2 years ago when it came out, and I wasn't a huge fan of that one, but this one I received as an ARC this year through NetGalley and I just fell in love. This one is a very broody musical rivals romance between two musical prodigies. The main male love interest is also like a cello player in this like rock band, which is really interesting. But I will always love a romance where the two main characters fall in love through their shared passions in art and interest. And this was that to a T. I think what made this one so special were the descriptions of the creative process and the musical compositions. They felt musical in themselves, but I just thought this one was so much fun. Number 5, I have The Kindred Curse Saga by Penn. I know this is cheating because it's the entire series, and if I had to pick one, I'd probably pick book 2, but honestly the series just gets better as it goes. And the second and third books are pretty hefty, but they don't feel like it because there are so many fun reveals and challenges and little like nuggets of candy sprinkled throughout the series that make it so much fun to read, and you want to keep reading because the slow burn in this book is criminally slow, but you're gonna love it. Luther is like by far my favorite book boyfriend from this year. He's just one of those characters that will just like burn the world down and die 1,000 deaths for our main character, and he tries. And listen, the thing about this book, which if you've heard anything about this book you might have also heard, that our main character Diem is a little tiny bit annoying at times. She will make choices that are gonna piss you off. She's very impulsive and hot-headed, but to Luther she can just do no wrong. Number 4, I have Nocticadia by Keri Lake. This is just one of those books that you're not going to be able to put down once you start it. Like I said before, I'm a seasonal reader. I was looking for that kind of dark gothic vibe for fall, and this was just the perfect book. This is a dark academia gothic forbidden romance between a professor and student with like horror elements and a very morally gray love interest. While I say it's a forbidden romance, it is professor-student, but it's not like scandalous in terms of age difference. At the start of the story, our main character's mother passes away from this very mysterious illness, and our main character, she works in healthcare and she is currently working to get her degree when she gets a very mysterious acceptance to this private institution that's located on this like secluded island, and this institution happens to be the only one with the rights to research this particular illness that may be connected to her mother's death. And when we get there, our main character ends up becoming the assistant to Dr. Death, who's this like very broody, very mysterious professor who is the head of research for this disease. And he's extremely morally gray. This is dark and gruesome, so if you don't like that, you're probably not going to like this one. But I had so much fun, and the tension between these two characters so good. I've also read a few more Keri Lake books since then and have loved them, and I'm definitely going to be working towards reading more from her backlist this year because I just love the vibes that she brings. Okay, now we're to my top 3. My number 3 pick is Just for the Summer by Ali Jimenez. This one I know made everyone's top books of the year list this year, and for good reason. This is just the blueprint for what I look for in a contemporary romance. It reached beach read tier for me, which previously nothing has been able to touch. Hey, so my camera somehow deleted my clips, so if the lighting looks different or the angle changed, that's why. But I was in the middle of talking about Just for the Summer by Ali Jimenez, which is a book about 2 people who meet on a Reddit thread, and they both believe that they have this curse where if they break up with someone, that someone then goes on to find their soulmate. So they make a pact with each other to date and then break up, so then hopefully, in theory, they will both go on to find their soulmate after that. Of course, that's not at all how this works out, but this is just my favorite genre of book where the cover looks super fun and summery and lighthearted, but the actual content in this book is going to absolutely emotionally destroy you and then put you back together again. Justin in this book is the epitome of if he wanted to, he would. This man makes pre-date questionnaires and exit surveys, and he's just fantastic, even with everything that he's got going on in his life. They both have a lot going on. There are some deep topics in here, but the found family relationships and the healing that goes on in this book is so delightful. I love this book so much, and clearly Ali Jimenez is doing something right because so many people connected to this book this year. I just fall more in love with her books every time she comes out with a new one. You know, this is like extremely cheesy, but I'm so grateful to be a reader in a time when there are books coming out like this. My second favorite book this year was a big surprise for me. It was the first time I'd read from this author, and it was The Unmaking of June Farrow by Adrienne. This is just the most atmospheric, immersive, beautiful book. It feels like stepping into a Hosier song, and it's a beautiful, atmospheric late summer read set on a flower farm in, I think, like South Carolina? Jasper, North Carolina. And this book is a lot of things. It has magical realism. It's got a murder mystery subplot. It's got a romantic subplot, but I think what makes this book so special are the themes of familial and romantic love that spans generations. I recommend going into this blind if you can, if you haven't heard anything about it yet, because that's what I did, and I just fell in love. And I really fell in love with Adrienne Young's writing this year. I have now read all of her adult books that are currently out, and I love all of them. They all have that magical realism element to them. But this one is still my favorite by far. It's just so special. I recommend anyone read this one. And now we're at my number 1 pick of the year. This was a really easy decision for me, but I have Two Twisted Crowns by Rachel Gillig. This is the second book in a duology called The Shepherd King duology. And this is a gothic fantasy romance, and it is just still to this day my favorite fantasy duology, fantasy romance series ever. I think this is just my perfect recipe for fantasy romance. I love the dark, gothic, misty forest setting. The magic system of the prophet cards is super interesting and unique. I love the monster that lives in our main character's head. Both of the romances in this book were fantastic, and the way that everything comes together and is wrapped up in this book, I think, is just perfect. It's one of those series where the second book is even better than the first, and I want to read so many more duologies. I think this is like the perfect length for a fantasy series. This author has another book coming out this year called The Night and the Moth, and I will be first in line so fast to read that book. But yeah, this was my favorite by far. I didn't have to think too hard about it. I read this in January and I still think about it every day. Oh, and also I just have to show you because I'm really excited. My best friend and her husband got me the Barnes & Noble special editions. They're just so pretty. The sprayed edges, I just love them so much. But yeah, those are my top 10 romances of 2024. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and please leave me a comment with your favorite book that you read in 2024 because I'm taking notes. Specifically for other genres, I'm interested in getting into sci-fi in particular, mystery, thriller as well. But yeah, I hope you'll subscribe if you want to, and I'm really excited about this channel, and I hope you'll come hang out with me.